Kipindi hiki cha Mimi na Tanzania kinaletwa kwenu na
Salolin, Color Your World,
inayopendwa na kuaminika kwa kizazi na kizazi.
Kwangua ushinde! Ndio, nunua ndo moja rangi ya Salolin, kwani kila mmoja ni mshindi.
Kwangua, sehemu iliyofichwa kwa utepe na picha ya zawadi uliopata itajitokeza.
Pia, kadi yako inakuingiza moja kwa moja katika draw kubwa ambapo unaweza kujishindia gari kubwa aina ya Tata.
Salolin, Color Your World,
inayopendwa na kuaminika kwa kizazi na kizazi.
Hello and welcome to our special report today from Channel 10, Mimi na Tanzania. My name is Hoi Stemo with Kim and Sam. Today we are here invited at a very special house to a very special guest of ours at his house who is well known as Sir Andy Chande. And today I want to repeat to you, my viewers, it's a special report. I would like to hear from Sir Chande. Who is he and how did he arrive to be where he is as a very prominent and well-known businessman in Tanzania and worldwide? But also, what advice does he give to the youth who are really looking forward to be one or among of the key prominent leaders, advisors, businessmen in the world like him? Mpenzi mtazamaji, kipindi ni Mimi na Tanzania na tutazungumza kwa lugha ya Kiingereza kwa siku ya leo. Sir Andy Chande, thank you very much for inviting us here. We would like to know, everybody would like to know, who are you? Who is Sir Andy Chande?
Well, my grandfather came from India, from Gujarat state, which is now Gujarat state. He came to Kenya. My grandfather on my mother's side. And then he decided to invite his son-in-law, that's my father, to come along and join him in Mombasa, which he did. And after working for a year, he left his father-in-law's employment and went and worked for somebody else in Mombasa. And eventually decided to move to Tanganyika. He came to Tanganyika and then stayed for a little while in Dar es Salaam, then moved to Bukene. Bukene is 90 kilometers from Tabora in the western part of Tanzania. Then he called my mother as well. She came. And I was born in Mombasa in 1928 in a house in Nadiaku, not far from Fort Jesus. The house is still in the same condition as it was in those days. Of course, it's improved. The picture is in one of my books, my second book called The Transition of Life. The picture is there. So, in fact, in that book, there's a picture of my first primary school and my childhood home as well in Bukene. So, and then I studied in Bukene, then in Tabora. My father was doing textile and produce business, and then he established a little rice mill to produce rice and dona in those days, which is now sembe. So, because that was crushing the maize corn without taking the skin off. And then he was also making sabuni, soap for laundry, blue mottle soap and yellow soap. And then when he moved to Tabora, he took agency of General Motors and Ford. Trucks mainly, 3-ton trucks, 5-ton trucks. In those days, 5-ton truck was sold at 5,000 shillings. You know.
But that was a lot of money.
A lot of money. And they were parked on a consignment basis. They used to provide them. So, and then I came here to Dar es Salaam to study. When I came here, I was about 16 years old. And then I have two brothers. My second brother wanted to study in Ireland. So my father sent him to Ireland after, even before his high school, before his secondary school. And I wanted to study ancient Indian history, to know about all India, because India has a very rich history. I went to a school, a missionary school called St. Peter's High School, and did my Cambridge school certificate there. It was a school run by Zanara Biblical Mission. And in those days they were very, very strict because they didn't allow, they had quota for the non-whites. You know, they were children of princes, but they had also quota for overseas students. So I got into the overseas student category. When I finished that, I went to a college in Pune. And took a BA course. Pune is about 3 hours car ride from Bombay. And there was a good university there. It was a cantonment town, an army town in the British days. So I then studied there. When I was finishing my intermediate, it was a 4-year course, my uncle, because we had a family business, so my uncle who was helping my father became very ill. And so my father wrote to me to say that will you come and stay here for 6 months, and when he's better, then you can go back and resume your studies. I said to myself, I'm not quite sure once I leave the college and go back to Tanganyika, whether I'll come back. So anyway, I arrived. I landed in February 1950 in a ship called Vasna. It was a British India ship here. And my father, I stayed here for a week or so, and then he sent me to Bukene. So that's where I started my job. My first job was in February 1950, working under my another uncle. We had 2 uncles. And he was a very hard taskmaster, but a man of principle and a man who I learned a lot. He was a good mentor. So I worked with him for some time, then moved to Tabora, and then came to Dar es Salaam. And I wrote to the principal that I think in college that I won't be able to come back now, so because I told him that I'll come back, principal of the college there in Pune.
But you never made it?
No, I never made it. So I then I joined the family business.
So when you started as who in your family business?
I started working for my 2 uncles, basically, because then I worked for the other uncle who recovered from. He had, I think he didn't have very good medical advice. They told him he had problem, his teeth was the cause of the problem, so they removed all his teeth. So finally, anyway, he recovered. He went to Tanga. He had also some problem with his legs. So somebody said there are some sulfur springs there. So he went there. But finally he recovered. So I worked for him. And now in 1956, Lord Twining, the governor of Tanganyika, invited me to become a temporary member of the Legislative Council. And then I mentioned this to my father. My father said no. He said, Sisi, what we are Bashara to, we don't get involved in politics. So he said no, so I had to tell no to Twining. And then in 58, just before 58, Twining left and Sir Richard Turnbull came and took over as governor. He then invited me to be not a member of Legislative Council, but also Executive Council, which is like today's cabinet in Council of Ministers. They meet every Thursday in Government House. So I that time thought rather than talk to my father, I'll talk to my uncle first, convince him, and he will then convince my father. So I spoke to my uncle, and he said, he spoke to my father. He said, okay, we will give him leave of absence, but he should not draw any salary from the colonial government or any allowances or anything. He should. So
you worked for the colonial government?
Yes, I first became a member of the cabinet and parliament, colonial parliament. At that time, the British Prime Minister was Harold Macmillan, and the person who appointed me or who recommended my name to the Queen was Ian MacLeod, the Secretary of State, through the governor, of course, governor and the Chief Secretary. So I joined. When I joined, they said that I asked if I had an Indian secretary working for me, if she could handle my government work. And they said no, because they couldn't security clear her. So they gave me wife of an officer in the ministry, in the treasury. So she came and worked for me, because they wanted to appoint the cabinet boxes, every week and so I stayed, and in 58, of course, then the Malimu went to the Trusteeship Council to plead for self-government of Tanganyika, and he had 2 visits there, and eventually the British government decided that they will give independence in 1960-61. Although Malimu's, in his mind at that time, was that there will probably be 10 years, but he was presently surprised that they shortened the period. And I suspect the British government, because after the Second World War, there was so much devastation, so much economic difficulties, even in UK and in most of the empire. that and Tanganyika was not a colony over there. It was a protected. It was a trusteeship territory because originally it was part of German East Africa with Rwanda and Burundi. So to that, and then the climate was not as nice as Kenya, which was their colony. So nice climate and good soil, good land conditions. Yeah, so they were, because even the civil servants, colonial servants who came here, they were not of the same category as they went to Kenya. Really.
How did it felt to serve the colonial government and be the witness of the independence of Tanganyika?
Well, whilst I was in the colonial government, I was specializing mostly on industrial and trade side really. And I too was not certain about the ability of the Tanganyikans to take over the administration of the country, because when they were talking about independence, there were very few leaders here. The graduates were very few, hardly about 10 graduates. Manimu was one of them. And in the civil service, in the hierarchy, there were not very many, nor in the trade. They were concentrated mostly in farming, and they were basically not cash crop farmers. There were some cash crop farmers in Moshi, in Bukoba, and Manza, but otherwise they were, subsistence farming really. So I had reservation, which I expressed to Ian MacLeod when I met him on a one-to-one. I said, you think there is a mistake? And what he said, I still remember very distinctly. He said, Her Majesty's government is not making a mistake, but if we are making a mistake, you would rather make a mistake going forward than remain static or going backward.
That's a good answer.
That's why, in 1960 then. Now, during that time, when the first election was being held, when they were in the constitutional arrangements were Asians, natives or Africans and Europeans. This is how the first election to the National Assembly was. That's the time when Malimu became Chief Minister. Now, at that time, Malimu sent a message to me through a man called Kasela Bantu. He's dead now. To say that Malimu would like you to... I joined TANU by then. He said he'd like to take a seat and fight a constituency. He never disclosed what the constituency was. So I said no, because I don't think my father died in 1959, and I need to really go back to the business because I have two brothers. One brother is a surgeon in Canada. He doesn't want to come back here, and it's a good practice there. And the other brother is in England. So I need to really look after the business. So I said no to him. He then sent a message through Oscar Kambona, who came to see me. And I said the same thing to him. So then a month later, Malimu, we had a mutual friend called Ibrahim Nathu in Nairobi, who was a friend of Malimu and a friend of mine. And we had lunch at a restaurant called Aquarium Club. Malimu was a bit critical of me. He says, Andy was helping the colonial masters of ours, but he doesn't want to help us. At that time I told Malimu, I said, Malimu, to be in the parliament or in the cabinet is not, there are so many ways one can help outside. So this is where he made me a member of this first 3-year development plan. I was the only non-government member there, non-minister. And then he started giving me a lot of positions, jobs, etc. For instance, when the Tanganyika government acquired first interest in TANESCO, I was asked to look after government's interest in TANESCO board. So that way he started giving a lot of things. So, but I enjoyed what I was doing, And my father always believed, you determine where you want to go, and then hard work. So that's the fundamental principles, really.
That is Sir Andy Chande. The show is Mimi na Tanzania. We've heard his brief history. We will go back and would like to hear now from him. How did he become a business empire after the father died, after independence in this country? And what was his key contributions in this very, very country of Tanzania? Kipindi ni Mimi na Tanzania. Tutaendelea.
Mimi na Tanzania, Jumapili, saa 3:30 usiku.
Ushinde! Ndio. Nunua ndo moja rangi ya saduli, kwani kila mmoja ni mshindi.
Kwangua, sehemu iliyofichwa kwa utepe na picha ya zawadi uliopata itajitokeza.
Pia kadi yako inakuingiza moja kwa moja katika draw kubwa, ambapo unaweza kujishindia gari kubwa aina ya Tata.
Sadolin, color your world.
Inayopendwa na kuaminika kwa kizazi na kizazi.
Mimi na Tanzania, Jumapili, saa 3:30 usiku.
And welcome back. The show is Mimi na Tanzania from Dar es Salaam in the house of Sir Andy Chande, one of the very key business people in this country. But out of that, he has been part and parcel of building this very country that we are in today. Sir Andy Chande, we would like to know, how did you become now the business empire right after the death of your father, after the independence of Tanganyika?
Well, Hoist, it was not really much of an empire. My father concentrated on the grain milling side, on export of coffee and export of other produce like beeswax and honey. You know, we specialized in this when honey and beeswax came from Tabora, which is from Mabama area. And at that time, they were big producers of honey, and they still do quite a lot. And the quality is better also. And I remember on one occasion, one year, we exported 40,000 4-gallon tins, debes, of honey to a company called UKCC, which was the parastatal of the British government during 1 year. We from all that. And there was a man called Smith who was the beeswax officer there. And he was an expert there, and he used to help the farmers. The only problem is that most of the beekeeping went during the time when the rains had failed, you know, so because it was not a very easy business to do, produce honey and beeswax. So anyway, so it was basically a grain milling and export of produce. In that sector, in the export of produce, we were number one. We became number one in the country. And in fact, there was a time when we had a lot of produce in Bukene area. A special train was sent by Tanganyika Railways to collect the grain for export. And most of that was exported to UK and Germany and certain other countries in Europe, really. So, and in the grain milling side, we were number two. We were not very big one. There was another company called Unga Limited. They were much bigger than us. So, so we concentrated and we depended on quality and making sure that the employees were well paid and they were well looked after. And but come 1967, after the Rusa Declaration, my entire family business was nationalized. Perhaps I don't know if nationalized is the right word, because I was a national of Tanzania when they did that, you know. So maybe compulsory acquisition, or an unwilling seller and a willing buyer, maybe, you know.
Nationalization was only done to foreigners or even nationals who owned?
Nationals, even nationals. The nationalization included all the commercial banks, which included foreign banks, which included British banks, one Ottoman Turkish bank, and 2 Indian banks, and 1 Dutch bank. And then a number of other industries, such as Bata Shoe Company, Metal Box, breweries, distilleries. So they were all nationalized. And also they nationalized local people's business, such as mine, in the grain milling sector and in other sectors such as sisal and farms. I think they didn't touch tea, they didn't touch pyrethrum, they didn't touch coffee. Coffee farms were not.
So what happened? When was your turning point, and how did it happen to again recover and start doing business as usual?
1967 February, on the 8th of February, I had a phone call from a lady called Shirin Hassan Ali, who was the personal secretary of Minister Babu. Abdurrahman Babu was the Minister for Commerce and Industry, inviting me to come to the office. And I asked her what the subject was, and she said, subject will be disclosed to you when you arrive. Right. Which that was not a very good sign when I heard that, I said, because there were rumors already, so. Because banks were nationalized earlier. So I went there were about 20 people. 2 were whites and the rest were Indians. And Babu read out a statement to say that effective noon today, your companies no longer belong to you, they belong to the state. and Deputy Minister for Home Affairs was sitting next to him. So one of the Mzungus asked if he can give us anything in writing. He said, no, there's nothing in writing. I suppose it probably was not sure because Bombay had not passed that national legislation, so he was not. So then I asked, I said, well, can you at least give us a copy of the statement that you've read out? Because it's now in public domain. You've already read out. It'll be in the media. He gave the copy. So we left. When I arrived at Chande Industries, which is now National Milling, which is now Bakresa, I found soldiers guarding the premises. So I went there and then I called the staff and I explained to them and I said, I'm going to continue to work here, although this company belongs to the state. And so that's how we started. Then the next day I was called by Malimu. That was the first time I met him in his office in State House. All occasions that I met, before that, since the many occasions, either at his home or in the cabinet room, but not in the office. So, and then somebody was recording. So I told Malimu, I said, I think you have made a grave mistake really, because history will judge you as to. He says, never mind about history, forget about it now. What do you want to do? We have some vacancies in the embassies as ambassadors. You want to come back to the cabinet government? We can arrange. I said, no, Malimu, I don't want to do any of that. So then what do you want to do? I said, I want you to remain and work in the same company. From employer, now working as an employee. So he said, fine. Now I will tell Jamal to settle your family's compensation case for shareholders compensation expeditiously and fairly. Then I left. And then I went back. Then when I went back, I found the morale had gone down in the sense that if I burst, servants will take a long time to come to the office. They thought that, well, now this is all Uma, Shirika Uma. So I had to call the senior workers, and I said, this is Shirika Uma, but we all have to put, if you don't produce money, then the nation will not, I didn't tell them that I will not get my compensation if the money is not there. So I think then it changed eventually. But so this is how it began. And then I ran that company as manager instead of chairman and manager of Chande. There was another chairman, there was a board. Then in October, my wife and I were invited by TWA.
What is TWA?
Transworld Airlines. Okay. Transworld Airlines. It now doesn't function at all. It was a big airline. TWA is the one that helped Ethiopian Airlines to start, which is now a big airline in Africa today. Probably of South African Airways, Ethiopian, Egypt, they are the three big ones really. So they had invited, and they were flying from Dar es Salaam to Athens to New York. So I told my wife, I said, shall we go? He said, well, probably it's a good idea. It will also give you change. Because, she was very supportive when the national, because we were literally on the streets. Because they had frozen I didn't have a bank account because the cashier of my family business was my cashier. So if I wanted to pay school fees, the children, or transport school bill or money for my wife, he would give. There's no point in keeping money when, so we were in a lot of difficulty. And she was very supportive. She was tremendously supportive. I mean, had it not been for her support. So we both went. On the third day, I got a phone call from my secretary. My secretary was still the same as Chande Industries, although he belonged to the government. He said there was a call from Mr. Nkembo, permanent secretary to President Nyerere, that Nyerere wants to see you. So then I said, okay. And then I rang Nkembo from my hotel in New York. And I said, I've come here as guest. If I buy a ticket now, I'll have to pay myself and my wife because, they will not allow, they will not change because I've come as a guest. There were other guests, Hassan Mkame was there. I think there were 2-3 Tanzanians were there. Hassan Mkame was Minister for Tourism. So he said, okay, I will check. And then he came back. He said, where will I call? Then he said, no, don't hang on, I'll come back. So he came. He said, okay, Malimu says, don't worry, enjoy your time, and when you come back, come. So we stayed. But my worry was all the time, what did Malimu want to see me about, So it was... Anyway, when we came back, I got in touch with the State House. Malimu had then gone to a non-aligned conference. I think it was in Cuba. But he had left a message that I should see Minister Bryson, who was Ministry of Kilimo. So I went to see him in Pamba House. With him was a man called Makosia, who was the permanent secretary, David Makosia. He was actually in agriculture. He's trained in Makerere. Very clever man. So they both said that we have been instructed by Malimu to tell you that when we nationalize your family business, we have nationalized 7 other companies. One of them belongs to the Wazungus from Kenya. And instructions are that you help to create a homogeneous unit out of that, because they're all doing the same thing. That doesn't make any sense, really. And they run it. As far as your Mashara and Rupurupu is concerned, Malimu will decide when he comes back. So I told them, I said, I would like to think about it. He said, what is there to think about it? I said, because one company, they are doing chakula, kuku and cattle feed, of which I don't have the knowledge, and I don't have the staff who will do it.
So they wanted to give you a docket to run?
Hold on, complete thing. So Makosa said, okay, you find expertise, not from South Africa, not from Israel, anywhere else. You don't go to Hamiaji or Labour, Kuja Kwango, bring the application to me, I will organize the whole lot. I said, okay. So that's how I took over. That's how and then Makosia asked me to help draft the piece of legislation to create National Milling Corporation. I told Makosia, I said, I'm not a lawyer. He said, I know, but you have a lot of business sense, etc. So I said, okay, I will have a go at it. So I wrote it. I told him I've got it here, copy. He says, we send it to Attorney General, Chief Parliamentary Draftsman. And there was a man called Rahim there, Bashir Rahim there. So he saw it, and then he showed it to Roland Brown, who was the Attorney General. He said, that's fine, let it go, send it. So this is how that piece was created.
For the national milling?
Yeah. When I drafted that, there was a clause to say that the minister cannot give directive of a specific nature to the management. He can only give directive of general nature, which helped me a lot when I had problem with Bryson, which is the story in my book, actually, in my autobiography. So that's how, and then of course when I retired in 73, December, I didn't want a job tied to a desk. I didn't want to be answerable to anybody except to my wife and to my God. And so I took on a lot of consultancy work and directorship, chairmanship. This is how I was made chairman of Air Tanzania, chairman of Tanzania Port Authority, chairman of Tanzania Railways, Tourist Corporation.
You are the founder of Shaban Robert?
Yes, I founded Shaban Robert Secondary School. I also I was one of the founders, International School of Tanganyika, and Buguruni School for Deaf, with 7 children. Now we have 259 children. Half of them are boarders. College of Business Education, CBE. Yes, CBE. There are 20,000 students now in 3 campuses. And sadly, the quality is not as good as it used to be when it started. And then I helped with the Indian University, IMTU, Medical University. I was the first chancellor there. I have resigned 2 years ago. Now Ali Hassan Mini, President Ali Hassan Mini is the chancellor of that university. But when I was starting international school, I went to see Solomon Ilyufu, who was the Minister for Education. He was the second Minister for Education in Nyerere's cabinet. He said, no way. He said, we don't want to have a school for expatriate children here. Why for? I told him that, investment, expatriate employees who come to work over here, they will say, we want to know what education facilities we have for children, what health facilities we have, what security we have. These things they will ask. But then I told him, I said, I'm afraid that I need to go to see the president. He said, okay, go and see the president. So I saw him.
And he agreed?
I saw him at his home, in his veranda, sitting. And he was also not very happy. He says, let me think about it. So to Vasiliana Badai. So I gave him the same reason, I told him this is the position. So he says, we'll call you after a week. He didn't call me. He called me after 1 month at the office at State House. He says, okay, you go ahead, but no children of Tanzanians should be allowed to study there. That's the condition. I said, okay, if that is the condition you want to do. So he said, I don't want two types of Tanzanians growing up together.
That is Nyerere Foundation. Dear viewers, you'll agree with me. Interesting story, interesting history from Andy Chande. We are coming to the end of the first part of our show today, and please continue to watch the next show as it's going to be the second part of our show. The show is Mimi na Tanzania from Dar es Salaam, Hoi Stemo, Kim Magawa, and Sam Sewando. I say bye-bye.
Kipindi hiki cha Mimi na Tanzania kimeletwa kwenu na
Salolin, color your world.
Inayopendwa na kuaminika kwa kizazi na kizazi.
Kwangua, ushinde! Ndio, nunua ndo moja rangi ya Saduli, kwani kila mmoja ni mshindi.
Kwangua, sehemu iliyofichwa kwa utepe na picha ya zawadi uliopata itajitokeza.
Pia, kadi yako inakuingiza moja kwa moja katika draw kubwa, ambapo unaweza kujishindia gari kubwa aina ya Tata.
Salolin, color your world.
Inayopendwa na kuaminika kwa kizazi na kizazi.